Money out of the ground is what oil is. Money is power. Power is money. It's always been that way for a long time. If something happens in China in the financial markets, our oil prices will drop $2 or $3 for no reason. Russia needs the European markets to buy their natural gas. If you do things politically that we don't like, we can turn off your gas in the middle of winter. We can't have a modern society without it. Anything you look at or touch is made from hydrocarbons. Can't have a functioning military without them. Can't have a modern world.
Welcome to the Executive Connect podcast. We're doing a new part of the series this week. We're going to start talking about alternative investments. And I've got one of our friends here, Ted Smith, a longtime oil broker, to talk to us a little bit about the oil industry. Welcome, Ted.
Hey, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Do you want to give the audience a little bit of a background about what you've got going on there in the oil business for the last several years?
Sure. So I'm a registered representative. I guess the informal term is I'd be an oil broker, kind of like a stockbroker. And what we do is we do syndications of oil and gas projects, much like people do apartment complexes and those sort of things for real estate. We do the same thing for oil and gas deals. People come in and they buy a piece of it. It's worked out pretty well. Love living in Texas. Never thought I'd be in the oil business. Before I did this, I was a college football coach. And, 20 years ago, if you'd have said I've been living in Texas or I've been in the oil business, I would have laughed you out of the room. But, chase a girl down to Texas, start a family, find something else to do. And, it's actually been phenomenal. It's been great. I love what I do.
Well, so Ted, we just had an election and, as always, energy is a big issue. I remember them talking about things up in Pennsylvania. It was a big election issue. How does energy and specifically oil and gas play such a central role in politics?
Well, look, energy, oil, the politics are so intertwined on so many levels. But, look, money out of the ground is what oil is. Money is power. Power is money. It's always been that way for a long time. Some people want more access to it for more people politically. Other people want it constrained. Other people, you've got the Green New Deal type of agenda. It's an incredibly powerful issue. I think it probably moved the state of Pennsylvania. I think it moved the needle dramatically in that one state, right? It's big where we're at in Texas. It's actually big everywhere because we have so much of it here in the United States. But I think in this particular election, in that particular state, it really moved the needle.
Yeah. So, kind of going from the global to the local level, how important is oil to the production of the world?
Ready to lead smarter and invest wiser? On the Executive Connect podcast, we unpack executive strategies for wealth and influence. Hit the subscribe button now. Don't just watch, act.
It's everything, right? We can't have a modern society without oil, bottom line, right? Pretty much anything you look at or touch is made from hydrocarbons, whether it come from gas or oil. It's in all the plastics in your house. It's in every hospital. It's in every car. It's in just about every product you'd ever use. Can't have a functioning military without them, right? Can't have a modern world. If you think back, like I like to think about, you think back to World War II, it was pretty much everything was metal or some other fiber of some sort. After that, when we truly got into the hydrocarbon age, when we started getting into modernity, what you and I and most people would call the modern world, it doesn't exist without oil out of the ground. That's just all there is to it.
All right. Well, so let's talk a little bit about oil prices. There's a WTI and there's a Brent crude. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between them and, the price spread between the two different benchmarks?
Sure. WTI, a lot of people see that. Most people don't know what it means. It stands for West Texas Intermediate. So that's a benchmark price set from the Permian Basin. One of the things that a lot of people don't know is that oil comes out of the ground in different qualities, at different gravities. It's not all the same. So there's an intermediate level of that And in the biggest basin in the United States is the Permian Basin. So the West Texas Intermediate is kind of the price that we go by. There's actually different prices here in Texas. There's a Houston Ship Channel price. And there can be other fields that are so big that they kind of get their own price. But they would anything produced in America or in the Gulf or Alaska would probably fall under WTI. Brent crude price is pretty much everyone else. It comes from the Brent Sea up north of the UK, where there's been a lot of production, but that also counts for anything found in the Middle East, anything found in Russia, anything found in South America or Africa. The relationship between the two is that there's always a spread. And if you go back for the last 15 years or so, Brent crude is a little bit more expensive than WTI. So even though there's a lot of American oil made that's actually a better quality right out of the ground, it's what you call sweeter. It's not sour. Typically, that spread is somewhere between $3 and $7. If you look today, so for anybody that likes to play spreads, if the spread between WTI and Brent gets more than $7, if Brent gets a little higher than $7 above WTI, might be.
This episode's sponsor is a couple I absolutely love, David and Alexis Kiwi. They help power couples be successful at home just like they are at work. If you're crushing it in the business world but quietly disconnected from your spouse, you're not alone. Check them out at davidandalexis.kiwi.org. They have spent years creating a simple tool set that will help you save your marriage. Don't forget to use code EXECUTIVE1 to save $500 off their 6-week coaching program. davidandalexis.kiwi.org, code EXECUTIVE1.
Be a good bet that it's going to contract and go the other way. And conversely, if they get down closer than $2, it's probably a good bet that it'll go back the other way. They don't deviate too much, but there's always a spread. They do march in tandem with that spread.
Okay. And so how much oil is produced and consumed worldwide daily? And then, how much of that does the U.S. consume?
Well, worldwide, the latest numbers that have come out a couple months back from the IEA has the world at about 103.8 million barrels a day consumed. So now, when I started in this business about 15 years ago, that was right around 92 or 93 million barrels a day. So that's gone up dramatically. Here in the States, we consume just under 20 million. So we take about 1/5 of all the oil that's produced, on a daily basis. So we're by far the biggest consumer in the world.
Okay, that's kind of interesting because you hear a lot from all the green movement and everything lately that everybody's expecting for the consumption to go down,
Yeah.
And meanwhile, over the last however many years, that is, 15 years,
Yep.
It's actually gone up about 10%.
Yes. Even with all the electric cars, all the solar panels, every windmill you could ever possibly hope to build here, we've still gone up dramatically. When you think about every time you see new construction, whether it be a home, a business, a road, there's oil used in building that. And there's electricity in every one of those homes. That's power. So all the folks in India, all the folks in China, everybody in Africa, they all aspire to have the life that most of us do here in the United States. So there's nothing to stop them from getting that. So it's grown dramatically. I don't see it stopping anytime soon. And by the way, 104 million barrels a day in consumption, that's an all-time high.
Right. So aside from, what we've talked about a little bit for the producers in the States, outside of the U.S., who are the biggest producers? And can you tell us, I think most of the listeners are probably familiar with OPEC. Can you talk a little bit about OPEC and their influence and its role in the market today, maybe as opposed to kind of its role 20, 30 years ago?
Sure. Yes, well, outside the United States is the largest producer, just over 13 million barrels a day, but OPEC has got about 12 countries in it. It's formed way back in 1960. Probably a lot of folks who listen to this will at least have heard about the oil embargo back in the 70s. when they decided to get together and really put a crimp in things and not allow so much exports because of the war, one of the wars going on there in the Middle East. We've gotten that straightened out. OPEC, though, by and large, is Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is about 40 or 45% of it. It's the steak on the plate. Everything else is kind of the carrots and potatoes. Right. OPEC is more or less controlled by what Saudi Arabia or whoever's running Riyadh there, Mohammed bin Salman, whatever he wants. If they're asking people to cut their production, they'll generally do it. If they're asking people to open the spigots, they'll generally do it. Within OPEC, Saudi Arabia is, they are the swing producer. So if they want OPEC to produce less, they can turn off the spigots. Now, outside of OPEC, you've got Russia. A lot of times you'll see it written up as OPEC plus. Well, that's OPEC plus Russia. They're not necessarily together, but they've started to work more in tandem here in the last 10 years because we've increased our production more and we've become the number one producer on the planet. So at 9 or 10 million barrels a day, that's what Russia puts out. Canada's pretty powerful. They have got a lot of tar sands in Western Canada. They've got about 5 million barrels a day, obviously very friendly to us. China's a large country. They don't produce near enough to support themselves. They're around 4 million barrels a day. Brazil is probably 3 to 4 million a day. There's some other oil there off the west coast of Africa and off Venezuela. But those are the major ones. We get a couple million a day out of Mexico. So the Mexican oil and the Canadian oil are very friendly. That helps supply us. We're obviously their biggest market.
Okay. Yeah. And who's in control of that, the production in those other countries? Is it the governments? Is it national companies? Is it private entities? I imagine that it has to be kind of a mixture of all of the above, depending on the country. But just can you talk a little bit about the geopolitics of that?
Absolutely. It is. It is a mixture of all of the above. Some of the European nations here in the last 20 years have really moved more towards a sort of a free open market style of private ownership like we have here in the United States. But pretty much everybody else has one large oil company for their country, like Petrobras. That's Petro Brazil. That is the government-funded oil company. It's huge. It's corrupt. It's not extremely efficient, but you're not allowed to access your own minerals. You're not allowed to hire a private drilling and exploration company to produce your minerals for you. Same thing in, Indonesia. It's Petronas, the Petronas Towers, famous from that one movie with Sean Connery, right? That's the headquarters for the Indonesian National Oil Company. In China, you've got the Chinese National Offshore Oil Company. You've got a couple others. In Russia, you have Rosneft and Gazprom. So to speak, they're independent and private, but they're not. They're under Putin's thumb. And when you look, there's one oil producer in Libya. They're in Saudi Arabia. Look, that is the House of Saud. That's sort of a foreign concept to a lot of Americans, right? That's one family controlling 26 million people and every drop of oil that comes out of the ground, right? So that's when I sit and think about it, that's actually a throwback to the Middle Ages. That's the house of, the house of so-and-so controls this area. Well, that house controls one of, the biggest oil field in the world. And so if, one leader says we turn off the spigots, then we do, right? So everywhere but the United States and Canada and probably Australia, you've got government control, certainly over mineral rights, but then probably over production. And even then, when you look at Europe, you've got France. They have Total, one large company. The United Kingdom has BP. There's other producers, but they've got one large company. Italy has one that was their state-controlled company that's recently been public within the last 20 years. Here in the United States, we've got hundreds, if not thousands, from small mom and pop operations to the whole way on up to Exxon. So it's a vastly different scenario about who controls things around the world. Too often as Americans, I think we assume that it's just the way we are, but but it's not, because it is,
Yeah.
like we said earlier, man, it's money is power, and there's money in the ground. That's what oil is.
So how does, you talked a little bit about OPEC and Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
How does Saudi Arabia through Aramco and OPEC, how they exert influence on global markets? And then you talked a little bit about the Saudi Arabian, leadership,
Hmm.
particularly Mohammed bin Salam. How do they, how does that dynamic play into what goes on over there?
Are you someone with a demanding job but tired of the 9-to-5 grind? What if you could build a profitable side hustle without sacrificing your full-time career? Our new partner, Book Profits, can show you how to turn your limited free time into a thriving online business. Learn how to find, sell, and profit from used books, all on your schedule from the comfort of your own home. Not crazy tech skills needed and no major upfront investment, just simple strategies that fit into your busy lifestyle. Visit the URL on the screen for a free training today and learn more.
Well, it's really interesting because, look, the Middle East is volatile all the time, but they've got the biggest chunk there on the Arabian Peninsula. Saudi Arabia does. They don't have that many people. They've got a population about the size of Texas, but they have a tremendous amount of oil. So when they want OPEC, the rest of the countries to jump, OPEC 9 out of 10 times going to jump. They've got the ability to, United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and Libya and everybody else that's there, they've got the ability to sort of crack the whip when it comes to increasing or decreasing productions. The market always looks to 2 or 3 times a year as when OPEC has its meetings. I think they hold their meetings in Geneva of what their decisions are going to be about their future output, whether they dial it back or they crank it up. OPEC was something started in 1960, but Aramco, which is, again, the only oil company in Saudi Arabia, Aramco stands for the Arab American Oil Company, right? That Americans helped them find it. It was Standard Oil, right? It was Rockefeller and Standard Oil first went over there and started to find some oil and help them develop it. And obviously now they run it themselves. But their decisions to open up the spigots or cut off the spigots, they move markets bigly. There's just no way around it. Now, because it's owned by a family and there's no true accounting of them yet, there was about 4 or 5 years ago, I think it was before COVID, there were some rumblings about them wanting to go public. Aramco's listed as one of the top 5 largest companies in the world, by revenue. They investigated, they were looking into it. They were going to list on the New York Stock Exchange because they wanted some more money, and it didn't fly because of all the accounting regulations need to be public. So that's a privately owned company with the most power probably of any privately owned company on the planet. And the leader of it is the Crown Prince. It's MBS, Mohammed bin Salman. He got put in power a few years ago by his father, the king. That ruffled a few feathers over there. Maybe 1 or 2 people disappeared or had a rough week or 2 in the family there. But he's younger. He's much more modern. He is seen as an ally. He's been friendly with and friendly towards Donald Trump, much more friendly towards Israel. That's a big departure for the Middle East. In the past, there were wars over, the oil embargo was put in place because we supported Israel back in the Yom Kippur War. So his influence is incredibly important into the direction that OPEC will play going forward here and how things change as we work our way into the middle of the 21st century. And they are the one big swing producer. If the other side dishes of OPEC don't want to play along, they can dial back production themselves or increase production themselves. So they've got a power that the rest of the producers just don't have.
All right. Yeah, I think most people think about, Saudi Arabia and sort of OPEC with regard to the oil markets, but sort of the more recent headlines are more about Russia and China. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned Russia a little bit earlier, but what role do they play in the production, and kind of how does geopolitics tie in there? And then also, China is a major consumer.
Yes.
obviously now. So how does that impact the overall global oil markets?
So China's major role is as a consumer. They're producing less than 5 million barrels a day. They need more than that. If they got to the point where they had full consumption and everybody was moved into the 21st century over there, they would use more than us. So their influence right now is a consumer. And if something happens in China in the financial markets or elsewise, and the Chinese financial markets sneeze, it seems like the oil market catches like a 3-day flu. Our oil prices will drop $2 or $3 for no reason. And then, 2 or 3 days later, you'll see the prices come back up, because you'll see and hear articles or people talking about, well, Chinese demand is going to slow down, right? So Chinese have made lots and lots of investments in other countries, including here in the United States, trying to buy up acreage, buy minerals, or just maybe even come in and buy some operations that are already in place. So they're trying to acquire and grow to feed all the people they need, feed all the energy they need. Conversely, Russia really only has about 150 million people, but they've got a ton of it. They've got it up in Siberia. They've got it right there, not far from them in Azerbaijan there in the Caspian Sea. So they produce a lot, but their importance is to Europe, especially in the form of natural gas. That's been in the markets, right? Talk about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline going into Germany. Russia needs the European markets to buy their natural gas. That exerts control over them. If you don't pay up, if you do things politically that we don't like, we can turn off your gas in the middle of winter. And your OMA and OPA will have to put on an extra sweater there in Germany or in Austria or wherever it may be. So Putin, one of the reasons you never really think about this, but Russia sometimes is involved in things politically and militarily in the Middle East. Well, why? They don't need the oil from the Middle East. It's not immediately next door to them. The reason why is what they don't want is any sort of major pipeline built from the Arabian Peninsula to go north, get through Syria. That's why Russia was in Syria. They wanted to make sure that there was no major pipeline built from the Arabian Peninsula through Syria into Turkey. You get across the Bosphorus and up into Romania. And now Eastern Europe has a different source of natural gas. That would be bad news for Mr. Putin. The other thing he doesn't like is the American natural gas, right? Our natural gas, you take it from a gaseous state, you liquefy it, you freeze it, you stick it on a boat, and you send it over to Europe. He does not like that at all. The guy who hates American shale production the most is Mr. Putin, because that cuts off his money tree there in Europe for natural gas.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that coming out of the Eagle Ford Shale right now. And Texas has got, those, pathway to those markets. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it really is, So we have more natural gas than anybody. In the United States, there's 5 or 6 major what you call shale drilling plays, where you go down, you drill horizontally into a layer of rock, you fracture it, and out comes oil and gas. Geographically, the biggest one is the Marcellus Shale. That's in the Northeast. It runs from New York down to West Virginia, through almost all of Pennsylvania, parts of Maryland, and the eastern part of Ohio. Lots and lots of natural gas. There needs to be more pipelines built. We can get that down to the Chesapeake Bay. Again, you take it from a gaseous state, you liquefy it, you freeze it, you stick it on a boat, you send it to Portugal, right, somewhere in Lisbon or in Barcelona or something like that, and get to another plant, and then they re-liquefy it, and they can ship it anywhere. And they pay a lot more for it. Here in Texas, same thing. The Eagle Ford Shale is about an hour, maybe an hour and 20 minutes north of the Gulf Coast. We're at the forefront of the whole LNG phenomenon. Down in Corpus Christi, there's a massive plant with 5 trains heading into it. So all the natural gas coming out of the Eagle Ford Shale runs in a pipeline. You can't put natural gas in a barrel or a tank. It's got to go in a pipeline. It's got to, because it's gas, it's going to expand. Oil you can move by pipeline. So there's an entire small city built near Corpus Christi for the entire purpose of liquefying the natural gas. We're building 2 more of them down in the Rio Grande Valley, right near the coast. So, and those got put on hold by the Biden administration. That's going to get reversed here quickly. Those will get built. That'll allow for more of Texas product, which we just have more of than anybody. And Oklahoma and Louisiana and New Mexico and Colorado and Wyoming, all of it. It will all come down and get out of the Gulf and go to the world, the rest of the world. And they'll pay a lot more for it. And we have hundreds of years worth. So looking forward to what happens here in the future. And oil has always been the backbone of the Texas economy. You'd be surprised how many names, how many companies, and how much wealth is descended from money out of the ground, from a long time ago. But there's a new wave of it that's happening right now.
Right. So, I mean, where do you see the global oil production going and consumption trends heading into the next decade?
I see it increasing, just steadily. Like world population, there'll come a day when it balances off or tops off or levels out. But I do see it increasing. We're sitting here, we're almost in 2025. I think by 2030, there's a good chance that we're pushing 110 million barrels a day consumed, and as a country, we're producing 13.3 million now, 13.3 million barrels a day. I think we could easily get to 15 or 16 million barrels a day. But that would take time. We could easily do it, but it will not happen fast. That'll take the next 5, 6, 10 years. And it would be a concerted effort to get there.
So let's talk some about our U.S. oil reserves, Ted. How much oil does the U.S. have? And how long would that supply last just in our reserves?
Wow, that's a great question. Our strategic oil reserves were created coming out of the oil embargo and the oil crisis of the 70s, so that we would have oil for a national emergency. It is separate from commercial reserves, right? We have the capacity for it's right around 650 million barrels, give or take, in storage, literally stored in barrels, underground in salt mines where you get less evaporation. It's down at the Texas, Louisiana coast. It was started back in 1975 and is run by the Department of Energy. And it's been on a controlled fill and release plan pretty much ever since it got going. But it's only supposed to be for emergencies. We have a massive hurricane like the one that hit New Orleans so many years ago. If we get into a war, that sort of thing, it's for emergencies. It's not a political football to be used as sort of like the last administration used. Now, when Trump's first administration ended, we had almost 700 million barrels in there. So he took the opportunity of COVID to buy oil at generationally low prices on behalf of the American public and fill that up. That's a good business decision. Since then, the Biden administration, certainly in their first 2.5 or 3 years, they slowly depleted that. They decreased drilling and they replaced that decreased production with oil from the strategic reserve to keep oil prices from getting too high. They did go higher, but they didn't get crazy as they should have because we had oil coming out of the strategic reserve. Right now we've got about 380 million barrels. So we went from 680 down to 380. In the last 6 months, they've been slowly refilling it a little bit. So we're about 40% below the level where it was, say, 3.5, 4 years ago.
So you talked a little bit about the reserves. Where's all this stuff stored? Is it just in one location? Sounds like a strategic reserve. Maybe it might be a good idea to store some of it in different locations.
Yeah, there are different locations. The big one though is in southeast Texas near Louisiana. There's caverns underground. Um, uh, Somebody once told me that they were sort of like salt caverns, but they might also be limestone caverns. I'm not sure which one it is, but they're stored in there, and there's planned releases from there. That every so often Congress sets it up that we sell some and we replenish it. Now the commercial inventories, the commercial storage in the United States is cut up into what you call the industry has cut the country up into different sections called pads. The big storage report that comes out once a week, comes out on Wednesdays, is the commercial storage report. And it's based off of the biggest, most important commercial refining hub, which is in Cushing, Oklahoma. So again, the commercial and the strategic are two different things. Strategic, you're just taking it and sitting it there. The commercial ones are based off of large refining capacity. So like the one in Cushing, Oklahoma, that gets the weekly report. They need at least 21 or 22 million barrels to run that, to keep the equipment lubricated, to keep it doing what it's supposed to do. That's run down a little bit here. We've gotten some reports in the past 12 months or so that they were reaching their low point on that. But the report comes out every week about storage and how much we have. Again, we use about 20 million of barrels a day. So look, if a hurricane and earthquakes all hit us all at the same time, and we had national emergencies, and we needed every drop from the strategic reserve just to sort of keep the military going, keep the lights on here. At 20 million barrels a day, we've got about 380 million barrels in there. So you're looking at about 20 days. 380 million sounds like a very large number. Right. It is, except for maybe barrels of oil, right? So at 20 million barrels a day, that's a little bit over a month to keep things rolling. So it's behooves us all to have that as filled as it possibly can be all the time. Buy it low and then release it when it's high.
Well, hey, Ted, I really appreciate all the insight. We talked a lot about kind of the global markets. We'll have to have you back on the show to talk specifically about Texas and our role in the overall industry. And then, also maybe a little bit about how we get the stuff out of the ground and how that all works. But I think
I'd love to.
Probably a good place to put a button on it for this show. So thanks for joining, and I appreciate you sharing your insight and wisdom.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining. That's the Executive Connect podcast. Until next time.